She's really teeny.
I had a baby. This is so crazy. I feel like I haven't even made a YouTube video since I got married. So there's just a lot that we need to catch up on. But in this video, we're not gonna do that. I wanna share my birth story with you guys. I did like a shorter version on TikTok, but I thought I would do the like whole shebang here on YouTube. I kind of wanna start off with the beginning of my pregnancy so we can kind of like go through that a little bit to get to how I ended up with a medical induction at 37 weeks. Basically, found out I was pregnant. I found out at like 3 weeks and maybe like 4 days. So I've known for a really long time. I didn't know that you don't have your first doctor's appointment until like 8 to 10 weeks. So that was really crazy. But we did end up in the ER at, I want to say 7 weeks and 3 days. I was having the absolute worst stomach pain of my life. I felt like I had a ruptured ovarian cyst because I've had those in the past. It's just so painful, and I just was really scared that I was having a miscarriage because that's something that I had so much anxiety about. I feel like my entire first trimester into really like most of the second trimester, I just had so much anxiety. I don't know, I just was so scared. I feel like I didn't really get to enjoy my pregnancy until I got into the third trimester. So yeah, we had that and they just said it's nothing, maybe it's like gastrointestinal, but that was our first ultrasound and she was measuring, I think like 4 days behind, 3 days behind maybe, but they really weren't concerned about that at all. Flash forward to our 20-week anatomy scan. Everything is looking great, but they did start doing some measurements and she was just like, huh, like when was your last period? And I told her and she was like, okay, she's just measuring a little bit small. So we're just gonna do a follow-up ultrasound. At that point, her head was in the 5th percentile. And so then we did another follow-up ultrasound at 24 weeks and I believe her head dropped to the 3rd percentile. Everything else was also really small. Everything had kind of been in that like 20 percentile range, so not like tiny. We did another ultrasound at 28 weeks and that's when everything kind of took like a really big dip. Her abdominal circumference was the thing that they were mostly worried about. Once your abdominal circumference kind of drops below that 10th percentile, I think that's when they start really looking into the IUGR diagnosis, which is intrauterine growth restriction. Basically, she's just not growing on track. That had dropped to, I want to say like the 11th percentile. They did another ultrasound, I believe I think I was 31 weeks. It was really only like 3 weeks after that other ultrasound. And her abdominal circumference dropped to the 3rd percentile and her head was like under the 1st percentile. Like it was tiny. And then everything else was below that 10th percentile at this point. So they're like, okay, like we're gonna go ahead and give you the diagnosis of intrauterine growth restriction. So at that point, I had to go to the clinic twice a week. We had to do BPPs and NSTs, which is a non-stress test. We had another growth ultrasound done at 35 weeks. That was our final one. That was kind of gonna determine when I got induced. I pretty much knew that I was going to get induced. My dad is an OBGYN, so I kind of was asking him questions. I've done a lot of research at this point on people who had IUGR and kind of what that looks like for labor and delivery, and pretty much everything I saw was that if you have like a severe case, they're going to induce you at that 37-week mark. And when I went in for that 35-week ultrasound, her abdominal circumference had dropped below the 3rd percentile. It was now like in the 1st percentile or less than the 1st percentile. My doctor was like, okay, you are not going a day past 37 weeks. So you're gonna go in at 36 weeks and 6 days and hopefully have a baby at 37 weeks. Now we're all caught up. Also, I wanna give a little background. When I found out I was pregnant, I did not want to have really any interventions. I did kind of want more of a natural birth. I was not wanting to get induced. I was not wanting an epidural. However, growing up with a dad who is an OBGYN, you know, I know the reality of giving birth. I know that really it never goes as planned. And so I was just kind of reminding myself that and not being too hard on myself with this diagnosis especially. I really wanted to just make sure that she was safe and healthy, and I knew that I was just gonna trust my doctors, and that was my new birth plan. So I went in Wednesday, March 12th at 8:00 p.m. And they started me on Cervidil, which is like a little like paper string thing. And they just kind of put it up in there. That's supposed to ripen your cervix. I had that in for a total of 12 hours. Basically, I want to say from like 9:30 to 12, I was doing fine. However, around like 12:30, I started like definitely having some contractions, and I was able to see like on the little screen because they were monitoring her heart rate and my heart rate. And then I want to say around 1 o'clock, I started getting them like every 2 minutes. I was like, what is going on? Like, am I supposed to be getting this many contractions? Then they diagnosed me with something called tachysystole. It's like an overreactive uterus or something like that. Basically, I was having way too many contractions, which is not great, especially small babies tend to not have a great track record with doing well with contractions. So they were obviously keeping a really close eye on her, making sure her heart rate was not dropping or like accelerating like crazy, because I was having a ton of contractions, and I continued to have contractions every 1 to 2 minutes for the rest of the time that I was on the Cervidil, which was probably like 8 or 9 more hours, but it ended up being fine, and she did great with those contractions, and I was just really thankful for that. The doctor came into the room and she checked me, and she was like, okay, I had made it to a centimeter and 70% effaced after all of that. So I was like, wow, a lot of pain for not a lot of like improvement in my labor or something. So then they're like, okay, we're gonna do something called like the Foley balloon. It's like saline solution that they like put inside of a little balloon basically, and it's supposed to dilate you to like a 4. I had the nurse in there and I had the doctor in there, and I was like, okay, is this gonna be crazy painful? Should I get the epidural before this or after this? So the nurse was like, I think she said that she had gotten it after and that it wasn't super bad. The doctor was like, I've gotten it before because it's painful. I've kind of heard like back and forth, like people saying that it didn't hurt and then other people saying that it's the most painful thing ever. And I am one for it being the most painful thing ever. That was literally torture. I was shaking, like shaking so bad. That was the worst pain I've ever been in my entire life. I feel like I have a decently high pain tolerance. I've always had really bad periods with terrible cramping. The point of like, I can't get up out of bed. I am in so much pain, like can't move cramping. And this definitely topped that. I was there with my husband, and I think he was like kind of shocked because like I don't even know. So I did not get the epidural before, and yeah, that was a terrible idea, because basically with the Foley balloon, I was getting contractions every minute, and then I would get another one 10 seconds later. So I was not getting a break in between those contractions. Yes, my body likes to have a lot of contractions. Probably like 15 minutes into having the contractions, in my head I was screaming for an epidural, but my husband says that I didn't scream. I really don't remember. That part was kind of a blur. I just wanted the pain medicine. But the thing that sucked was I didn't know that I had to have like at least half a bag of fluids in me before I could get the epidural. So the nurse comes in and she's like, I'm so sorry, but you have to have like half a bag of fluid in you before we can bring the anesthesiologist in. And I was like, how long is that gonna take? And she's like, probably like 30 minutes. And I'm like, okay. After about an hour, I ended up getting the epidural and I felt great. And also they say a lot of people, it takes like 6 hours for the Foley balloon to fall out, and it only took me, I believe like an hour and a half. At that point, I probably could have just done the whole thing without an epidural. I think I only had the epidural for like 15-20 minutes until like the Foley balloon fell out. But at that point, they checked me and I was a 4. And then they started me on a little bit of Pitocin, like tiny bit. They just wanted to start me off slow and kind of see how Everlay was doing. After like a long time on Pitocin, I still was at that 4 centimeter mark. It was probably like 2 hours that I was on Pitocin, and they kept increasing it every 30 minutes. And then doctor came in and broke my water. And from that point, I definitely went really fast. I dilated really quickly. I don't know if it was just because of them breaking my water. They also did some like peanut ball positions because she was OP, so she was head up at that point, and they're like, let's see if we can flip her. She ended up flipping, so that was great. Yeah, we were just doing all these like peanut ball positions, and I just remember like the feeling of being numb and them like touching my legs. I absolutely hated that feeling. That was another reason why I didn't want to get the epidural. I have like an irrational fear of being numb. I don't know what it is. I hate it. I hate the feeling of being numb. Yeah, that was interesting. And then I just remember like after a little bit of time, I was just like, my back is like kind of starting to cramp a little bit. And I started getting scared because I'm like, is this epidural wearing off? Like I hadn't had it for very long. And so they're like, okay, we're gonna like lay you on the other side. They flip me and I'm like, no, it's kind of getting worse. Yeah, guys, I don't think the epidural is working. Like someone please come fix this because I feel like birth is near and I want this epidural working well for me. I just remember the doctor coming in 5 minutes after I said that and checked me, and she's like, oh, you're at an 8. And then I think it was like maybe 5 or 10 more minutes, and I'm like, guys, like I'm really getting some pressure here. And then she checked me again. She's like, oh, you're at a 10. You're about to have this baby. And then I remember like everybody walked out of the room and I'm feeling so much pressure, like I have to use the bathroom pressure. And I'm there with my mom and my husband and we're like, I feel like I have to push this baby out and I don't see anybody. Like there's like somebody like getting like the baby setup ready. So like there was like a different nurse that I had never seen before. She was like just kind of getting like that area set up for Everly. Then like another nurse came in and I'm like, I really feel like I need a push right now. And she was like, okay, you can start pushing. But I'm like, no. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because yeah, she came out really fast. So basically doctor came in and she was like, okay, like let's get ready to push. And so I did 3 pushes in the first contraction and she was like, oh my gosh, like your baby's like coming out. And she's like, I feel like it's not gonna take very long. And then I pushed again 3 times during the second contraction. Finally, during the third contraction, I pushed her out on the first push. She came like flying out basically. I think it was a total of 7 minutes. However, since she did come out so fast, like flying out fast, I did get a 2nd-degree tear. So that was really unfortunate. That was not fun to heal from. She came out and baby girl was so healthy. I was able to do skin to skin with her right away. They set her right on me, which I wasn't sure that I was gonna get that because I thought they were gonna have to take her and just take some like vitals really quick. They were able to do all of her vitals like right on my chest. But when they did take her, she was just right next to me and they weighed her. She weighed 4 pounds, 15 ounces. Yeah, she was just a little tiny peanut and they're like, wow, she's got a tiny head. When they did all of her percentiles, she was below the 1st percentile for everything. She was having some temperature regulation issues, which everybody expected. So in the very first 24 hours, we had to do skin to skin. Noah and I really didn't get sleep that night because we were just passing her back and forth between both of us doing skin to skin. They didn't want anybody else holding her during that 24-hour time period. They just wanted me and Noah to be doing that. They didn't really feel comfortable with her just being in a swaddle, being inside the little bassinet thing. I didn't want that either. I was totally fine holding her because that's all I've wanted to do for like the past 9 months. She latched to me right away. I was like, yes. However, I don't think I was producing enough like colostrum for her, so she was having some blood sugar things. So we had to supplement with some formula, but they had this really cool thing where I was able to breastfeed her while there was like a little tube going into her mouth, and Noah would just like take this syringe and like a little bit of formula would kind of come in at the same time that she was like feeding. She was able to breastfeed while we were still able to get some of that formula into her body just to kind of give her some more calories and nutrients. And then after that, her blood sugars were all good. She was a little jaundiced, but they felt comfortable with her levels. And then when we got discharged the following Monday, they rechecked her jaundice level. She was a little high, so they drew some blood. She felt comfortable with us not having to do the lights, but they did say that she was probably gonna be yellow for like probably the first 2 months. Like we had just such an awesome experience, and it was everything that we prayed for, because I kind of feel like we did have a little bit more of a difficult pregnancy. Not difficult, but you know, just kind of, it was just a lot of unknown. We weren't really sure what was going on. We weren't sure if something was wrong, but they did end up sending my placenta into the Mayo Clinic and everything came back normal, so there's nothing wrong with my placenta. I think the doctors think that it was half genetics because my family is really small. I'm very small. I'm like 5'1", and I was not a big baby. None of my siblings were big babies. My parents weren't big babies, so they think it was partially genetics and then partially growth restriction. Yeah, so that is my birth story. I feel like there's a lot of negativity around inductions, and I do know, like, obviously there's so many things that can go wrong, but there's things that can go wrong with natural labors. There's things that can go wrong in any situation. Your body's gonna react how your body's gonna react, and I just was really lucky, really fortunate that I reacted very well to my induction. Everly reacted really well to the induction, and I just have an overall very positive experience with it. So yeah, if you have a medical induction and you're really worried about it, I hope that this kind of helps you feel a little bit better about it. Yeah, but that is my birth story. And now we have our little bean, who's still in preemie clothes at about a month old, but she is 5.5 pounds now. You're getting so big. All right, I love you guys, and stay tuned for the next video.